Welcome to Mistakes Well Handled, where real people share real mistakes and the lessons that actually matter. Mistakes Well Handled is a 30-minute conversation built on three truths: regret, what went wrong, revelation, what it taught, and reality, how it changed life or work. We explore one professional mistake and one personal mistake, hearing the unsanitized stories from leaders within the industrial space. I'm very excited about this episode. I managed to be incredibly lucky to be introduced to Jarvis through a mutual connection, David. And the moment that we first spoke, I was just taken by your ability to share knowledge and share insights and your storytelling ability. And I think it's made me particularly excited about this particular podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am really, really excited, and it's a pleasure to introduce you to Jarvis Cooper. Jarvis, please say hello to the audience.
Hello, audience. Hello there.
So, really, to start things off, it would be great to understand just a bit more about your story, where you're from, where you grew up, and perhaps how you found yourself working within the safety sphere of kind of industrial businesses as well.
Yeah. Well, originally from Memphis, Tennessee, and had the opportunity to graduate from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And after that, I lived in about 7 different states, so I moved around a lot, and which was really great. Gave me a lot of different exposure to different work cultures, different types of systems and processes and that kind of thing. Working career sort of until 10 years with Burlington Industries and 11 years with Michelin Tire Corporation. And with Michelin, I managed distribution centers as well as in their corporate training North American group. Left there and went with a company called Cummins Engine Company, where I was a director there in organizational development, director of organizational effectiveness. And that was really in a way to broaden my perspectives around the industry and working at various levels of management and leadership. After that, 1998, we started a business called Envision Organizational Consulting. And during that period between 1998 and now, which we still the president of that, we do what we call an affiliate professor at University of North Carolina, their executive leadership program. So a lot of opportunities to get a lot of exposure, and I really have a passion for the things that I do.
Awesome. And it's really interesting how you've traversed, various different sectors within the industrial base, from
Yes.
automotive to manufacturing kind of more broadly and various other areas as well. That's super, super interesting. You obviously know from listening to previous shows that one of the real differentiators for us is how we can provide insight through mistakes that those guests of ours have experienced, and effectively provide the best insights we can and the stories of people's journeys through the mistakes that they've made. So with that in mind, I would love to dive into a personal mistake that sort of comes to mind for you that perhaps, has really helped shape your career or your thinking as of today. And, the key for us is really to kind of understand how that's kind of helped you evolve as a human being, but also as a professional.
One of the things is really striking as I reflected on that. The mistake, I want to give just a little background around leading up to the mistake. My mother and father are very important in my life. As a matter of fact, at the age of 14, I was taken to see Martin Luther King speak in Memphis, Tennessee. And I was celebrating. This morning, I just left for breakfast celebrating the birthday of Martin Luther King, which really is at the forefront of my mind. But my parents had taken me there to hear him speak, and the very next day he was murdered. I can't share with you how striking that was, and it really penetrated my heart in a lot of different ways, because I left that period of time wanting to know how I could really influence others, and at the same time really being struck and how can I actually allow my life to be part of carrying out this speech that he had just spoken. Well, what leads and makes it very apparent a personal mistake for me? My mother was diagnosed in November 1995 with ovarian cancer. And the doctor met with me individually and said, your mother, I'm going to be very straightforward with you. She has about 12 months to live. I was living about 7-hour drive away at that time, really struck. My father and she had been married for, at that time, about 40 years. And as I mentioned, they were pillars in my life. Well, my father told me, he said, I wanted you to know that I don't want to live a day longer than your mother when she passes. And I said, okay, Dad, yeah, right. I know you're in mourning and that kind of thing, grieving. I just didn't give him any attention. I really just put all my energy and poured it into my mother. And during that year time, I went back and forth that 7 hour drive as much as I could, spend as much time as I could with her, while my father just sit idly on the side in his big lounge chair, looking very sad, but not saying much. Well, lo and behold, my mother did pass out almost a year to the day after that. November 1986, and my father was very much so grieving. And I said, Dad, now is my time to focus on my father. And at that point, I realized how much in grief he really was. And
Mm,
the personal mistake I made is that during that year, I didn't pay him any attention. I only poured my heart, mind, and feelings out to my mother. So my father was doing this since we were coming up on the holidays. We invited him to come stay in our town, which is 7 hours away, and just spend the Christmas holidays, hoping that my little son, who was 6 at the time, would really help bring him out of this grief. Well, my father, while he was there, he was rushed to the hospital. And I received a call from the hospital saying, if you want to see your father alive, we really need to come over and see him now. I was really struck because he really wasn't all that sick in my mind, and really was shocked that here he was. I'm about to lose my father after 10 weeks of having lost my mother.
mm.
I made a decision not to go to his bedside. I made a decision because I felt like I was still in grief with my mother and didn't know if I had enough within me to go and be there with my father, certainly to see him pass. And so for years and years and years, he did pass, by the way, hours after they told me I should come. I really regretted not being there. And I wondered, had I been the son for him, that the father he had been for me. And so that was really grieving. I carried that for many years, and I felt my father say, let it go. I'm okay. It really was no worries. How it didn't really make me feel so good. What I did, the personal insight for me, though, how do I set aside my fears for the sake of others? It was my fear that got in the way. And I realized how much of a transferable emotion that is, in that I really wanted to set aside fears in order to be there for others. So that's a lesson that I really took forward. And it's a lesson that I really cling to today. I didn't realize that my wife and I at that time had been married 40 years, and she had been diagnosed with brain cancer and had 3 to 5 years to live. And I remembered being there, and I spent all of that time really doing whatever she wanted to without any fear of her passing. And I learned from my mother and father that set aside that. She ended up living 6 years instead of 3 to 5. And I have no regrets during that period of time because of the lessons that I learned from my mother and father.
I just firstly want to thank you for being so open and sharing that experience with us. I mean, family broadly is the most important thing. Actually, I read something a little while ago. It's quite poetic, but as you were describing the experience made me think of it because I mean, obviously I can see you and I can hear, and obviously I have an anchor as to what you're like generally and what you're like on this call. So I can sense the grief that still sort of exists there.
Yeah.
So what I read was a really interesting quote, which was grief is the price that we pay for love. And I think it's a
Mm,
really poignant way to think about loss. So I just wanted to share that because as you were
thank
talking,
you. Thank you. I received that, and it helps me a lot even to this day.
yeah, so that's immediately what sort of came to mind. But I like to kind of just understand from your perspective, because it seems like you went through a real period of evolution. And often one of the questions that we ask to guests is, as human beings, we often tell ourselves a lot of mistruths. Um, and it's only when we have experiences or face adversity that we start to understand actually or stress test those beliefs. From that experience, is there a particular lie that you used to tell yourself about yourself that perhaps you realized isn't necessarily true as a result of the experience that you faced?
Wow, that's a very good question. I think one of the beliefs that I always carried is that men don't cry and they can handle things.
Mm.
And I think the one thing I realized is that crying and emotion is a part of living. And it helped me not to be so resistant in holding back and pretending that emotions didn't exist that they really did. I think it allowed me to be more transparent. And
Mm.
so the lie, I guess, is it's not okay to be emotional. And what I realized, particularly in leadership and working in industry, that it's your heart that individuals see. In order to speak to their heart, you need to speak from your heart. And in order to do that, many times you have to be more transparent than you really like to be.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I
Mhm.
think even myself, I think going through a journey where I think vulnerability is quite difficult for a lot of men to show.
Yes.
And one of our last guests actually touched on this. Janelle, she was describing how vulnerability builds that bond and trust. And you also touched on it before we spoke as well. So I can see how that would be really powerful. One, liberating for you, but two, in the context of your profession as well, how it would really help cement those relationships. So
Yes.
how have you found that this has impacted the way that you treat those that perhaps report to you or that you've partnered with or work with? Because it seems like you've been on this journey of sort of more openness and vulnerability. Do you find that that's impacted the way in which you work or coordinate or treat those around you from a professional perspective and even personally, in fact, as well?
Yeah, I really do. And it's one of the cornerstones of the books that we're writing that should be released next month. And it's The Leader Within. And one of the things that I've really been struck with as I look back over my career in life is that I have spent sometimes you you hide things and therefore you're not authentic. And because of not being authentic, you end up living up or down to other people's expectations for you. And it is very binding. And so what I've learned is to be this transparency, this openness that I realized through my parents and realized through certain situations, how it transfers over into my working career, my living experience, is that I realize when individuals are asking me questions, particularly at the university and leadership programs about certain things, they're not interested in what's in my head. They're interested in what's in my heart. And I've been challenged by many of them saying, Jarvis, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to write a book? And I realize more and more, it's not like they're wanting additional concepts and tips. What they're
Mm.
really wanting are the things that oftentimes professors and other individuals are not so willing to share.
Yeah, interesting. And I can see how that would make a lot of sense as a student, or being able to kind of engage with those that are teaching you on a human level would be really impactful. And also as a colleague from a professional perspective, whether that be
Yes.
through academia or in your sort of professional work, how having that would cement the relationship a lot more. So, yeah, that's a great insight, very helpful. Yeah, I'm also going to take a lot away from that myself. I think the best the best guests are always those that I'm learning from myself. I mean, I try to learn from every guest, but there's a lot of wisdom in these kind of experiences. So that's definitely something I'm going to take away personally as well. So you've kind of touched on this a few times, which is how you've taken these moments and these learnings and how you've applied them going forward into your career and personal life. It's always interesting to understand not necessarily just what you've applied, what it's prohibited you from doing. So what are you more careful about not doing now or doing as a consequence of this and the various other experiences that you had?
The one thing I listen for not just the spoken word, but the unspoken word. I listen not so much with my ears and head, but my heart. And
Mm,
it's amazing how much you miss when you eliminate those particular senses. It's almost like elevating the antennae, and now you'll be able to pick up sounds and vibrations that were always there that you were not able to pick up before. Life before was a bit more transactional and it became a bit more, let me understand the problem so I can solve it. So it was very much so in the mental side of things.
mm,
It wasn't so much around what are your thoughts? What are your feelings behind your thoughts? One of the things I realized is that feelings will always trump logic. And if someone, you can't come up with enough reasons for someone to like you.
mm.
And so therefore, I need to connect at the feeling level so that I'm in a position to understand what logically makes sense in order to connect with you. Maya Angelou said they may not remember what you've done, they certainly remember how you made them feel. So
Absolutely.
I'm more conscious as I'm interacting with individuals now around help me understand what you're not saying is a
Mm,
question that I start using more because individuals oftentimes share with you the areas that they are comfortable about. And so therefore they hide the things that are really driving them. And until you're able to excavate that, you're still going to be communicating at an artificial level. So I ask, what is it that you're not saying that you like to say? Or what have I failed to ask you that's contributing to you not feeling the way you like to feel? And once I do that, we now can have a heart to heart conversation. And therefore, it becomes more authentic. And as a result of that, it becomes more genuine. And as a result of that, it has more sustainability. And we end up connecting at a deeper level.
Yeah, no, I think that's so powerful. I mean, I didn't know that that quote was attributed to Maya Angelou, but I can see how she may have said something along
Yeah.
those lines. It's very wise, and also I think it's something I can resonate with personally as well. Because if I
Mhm.
think back at situations, it's probably hard to actually recall exactly what happened, but I can certainly remember how I felt about those
That's
things.
right. That's right.
To this day, I can remember exactly how I felt, exactly how I felt.
Yes.
Versus, whether the situation itself was actually quite trivial or not really. Yeah, it's interesting. It's a
Yeah.
really useful way to think about things. Okay. I mean, I've loved this personal segment. I don't want to move on from it, but I think it's also really important for us to dive into your professional background. And obviously you have, a really extensive and lengthy professional background. So excited to hear some of these insights that you're going to share. You're halfway through Mistakes Well Handled. If this conversation resonates, come join the Misconstrued community. Get direct access to our guests, no filters, no fluff. Okay, let's get back to it. So I think taking it from the top, is there sort of a professional mistake that comes to mind and stays with you today?
Yeah, it's almost I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but it still sticks with me. And it's amazing how you learn the most from sometimes the things that hurt the most or that you wish you had done differently. It's very vivid to me. I was managing a distribution center for Michelin Tire Corporation. And within this distribution center, I was accountable for the office, which we had a office personnel who spoke to customers and salespeople and this kind of thing. And also we had a distribution side where we physically ship items. And so we had a warehouse and as well as office. And I was a distribution center manager for that for pretty much the state of Florida. And I recall getting one of the office people who was married to one of the people in the warehouse comes and said, Mr. Cooper, I just got a call from the daycare and I really need to leave right now. They need me, my child is sick. And I said, oh, wait a minute, Debbie, hold up. Let's see what options we have here. I didn't have children at the time, so therefore I didn't really have a heightened sensitivity of what it's like for a mother to have a sick child. As a matter of fact, I've been married 12 years at that time with no children. So we were double income, no kids. She was career, I was career. So I really approached things a bit more transactional than perhaps the average leader. So I tell you what, Debbie, I'm willing to do. I just checked with the warehouse. I can let your husband go, but I can't let you go. As a matter of fact, I've already made arrangements. They can do without him in the warehouse, and he can be leaving here within the next 15 minutes. I thought this was a great idea. The business moves on, the child is taken care of. So immediately the father is upset, like, I don't want to go in with that sick child. It's just going to be crying. It doesn't want me anyway. And I go into the mother and she says, she just breaks down crying and runs out and goes to the women's restroom and breaks down. And I'm saying, what was that all about? I allowed somebody to go and be with the child. I am totally confused at this point.
Um,
However, I'm very much so dug in and saying, look, this is the decision I made. This is the one we're going to go with. And so he went on to be with her. And she answered the phone she was just very upset. Customer service wasn't customer service at that point in time for the afternoon. And I realized after I went home and I shared with my wife at the time, she says, you did what? You did what? You mean you didn't let her go? I said, well, I took care of the business and I took care of the baby. I don't see why there's a big deal. She said, you made a big mistake. I said, I don't. So the next day I went in, I was trying to be overly kind to her. She hardly wanted to speak. And I asked how was the baby was. She was very snappy. And I realized at that point in time, I had not listened to her with my heart. I had not listened to her with anything other than how can I make this a win-win situation?
Yeah.
And I realized how important it is that how a mother interacts with the baby at times may be different than how the father interacts with the baby, which I learned went on later to find out for myself. However, that was a real big learning point for me. You can't approach situations, business and transactional all the time. You really sometimes need to listen to what you're not listening. What she was really saying is, my child needs me. What I heard is that the child just needed somebody there.
Yeah, that's such an interesting and powerful distinction, right? Um,
Yes,
had you have kind of explicitly heard those words, it would have changed the way that you responded, even if you were thinking from a transactional perspective. I think,
even if.
I'd spoken to someone in the past, and they kind of described it as just people having different language registers. And I think I faced this challenge myself before as well, because I tend to probably find it easier to speak to people who are quite precise in what they communicate.
Yes,
But at times, there's a meaning behind the meaning or the question behind the question, and it's
yes.
it's important to dig into that. So I can certainly see how that would transpire in that way. But really, really interesting actually. So from that in mind, how has that taught you to treat others going forward? Because obviously that was some time ago. Did you find that it impacted the way that you treated others, or even in the way that you inquired when you were speaking to the team or colleagues, or even personally in those relationships?
Yeah, I really did, as I expressed before, became a lot more sensitive
Mm,
and felt with my heart more so than my head, and realized too, there are opportunities sometimes to share with others. These are the things that we have to get accomplished. Having said that, what do you see might be a way to have your needs met as well as what I need met? The last thing I was interested in is her ideas around how we could make this a win-win situation. So I'm a lot more open to that and engaging others into solutions as opposed to feeling like I have to have all the right answers. And particularly when they're all analytical
mm,
and not really taking into account the heart.
yeah. Yeah, what I'm taking is a kind of common theme across the first kind of personal mistake, and also this one is that um, it feels like you've been through an evolution of sort of heightened senses. As human
Yes.
beings, we have so many senses, and I think a lot of us aren't
Yes.
into all of them. But it feels like you've sort of evolved your senses now to really be able to connect with people on other levels, which is like a super powerful trait to have. I guess away from the negative kind of impacts, how have you found that evolution has helped you sort of in a positive light?
Yeah. It's you wonder how has it helped me now as a positive light. And one of the things, I've been pastoring a church for the past 25 years. Um, so this running from the pulpit to the airport keeps me balanced. And it seems like it will be overwhelming. And sometimes I look back and I say, how did I ever do it? How
Mm,
it ties into your question is that it allowed me and still allows me to be a better pastor. It allows me to listen more and in counseling others, it allows me to be more sensitive to what they may be bringing to the table. Within our congregation, initially, we had individuals that were in senior management for the company and the town that I'm in, all the way to those that some at the point in time when we first started were just having been incarcerated and coming into the body. So being a pastor, a wide range between someone that's recently been incarcerated and someone that is a VP of a Fortune 500 company, and being the pastor of that overall scenario, it requires a lot of elasticity around connectivity when it comes to sensitivity.
yeah, definitely. I mean, you have, so many different types of people, right, as a result of that as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. The thing that's really made me think as you've been discussing your experiences is what we've often found is that people have frameworks or mental models that they apply as a consequence of the mistakes that they've made. So are
Mhm.
there any particular rules that because I think it's hard sometimes to kind of take a lesson and consistently apply it. So I think a lot of people like to have that level of structure in place. So is there
Yes.
a habit or a rule or a framework or a mental model, for instance, that comes to mind that you apply as a consequence of all these learnings because of all these mistakes?
Wow, that is a very good question. I think the one that resonates with me is Stephen Covey around seek to understand before being understood. That one is something that I've sort of adapted and adopted to be a mantra for me because it slows me down. It places me into a role of what questions do I need to ask as opposed to what statements do I need to answer. And allows me to really, as I mentioned before, hear and feel the unspoken word. The other thing is focusing in on how important to realize that no one can make you mad without your permission.
Hmm.
And sometimes I find myself getting upset and I'll say, okay, why are you permitting this? Because it's never about them, it's about you. When I start pulling that together, couching my emotions and then seeking to understand before being understood, it's amazing how we have more insightful conversations and relationships. Everything boils down to relationships.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's interesting in these episodes that we've been recording. Um, there's a common theme, I think, across the guests, which is obviously a really good sense of wisdom from their lived experiences. But I think this idea of compassion, empathy, and understanding seems to be emerging as a key theme for leadership,
Yes. Yes.
particularly in this industrial space as well, which I'm an outsider. So it's not what I expected. I expected it to be a lot more transactional. And yeah, I expected it to be what you would imagine with corporate America. But it seems like this sort of compassion, this empathy, and this desire for understanding is a really big theme amongst a lot of leaders. And I'm surprised, pleasantly surprised, and actually fascinated by it, to be fair.
I can share with you my experience and me too. I got surprised around that.
Yeah.
Having been in this business as long as I have, I've seen an evolution and a shift.
Yeah.
And it's very much so generationally oriented.
Interesting.
When I first started, it was a matter of getting compliance and being
Interesting.
very complicit in how what you just needed to do was explain very clearly what you need so that you can get compliance, so that you can get done what you need to get done. Well, that
Mm,
worked for a certain generation. Then generations started coming into the workforce that had ideas that they wanted to share. And because of the lack of openness, sometimes you got resistance.
mm,
And the quote I oftentimes will use is that which you resist will persist. So they realize that the more they resist, the persistence from the other side is continuously elevated.
mm.
And so therefore it became necessary in order to get other perspectives. The other thing is that the shelf life of the expert became shorter and shorter.
Interesting.
Technology was replacing some of the mindsets. You no longer depended on the smartest person in the room because they may have been the smartest person last year, but because things have changed so quickly and technology is now doing part of those jobs, now they're no longer perceived as being the guru. The only way that you could compete was through collaboration and not just settle for competition. Collaboration meant that you had to engage minds and ideas and perspectives of others in
Mm,
order to be able to accelerate growth. Hence, in order to bring in new ideas, you need to connect differently and you need to help individuals feel a part of the situation, which
mm,
meant you needed to connect more so with the heart in
mm.
order to get the results that you were looking for. And individuals finding out that I feel better that way. As a result, we all are celebrating at the same time, as opposed to one person celebrating while others are standing on the sideline. So it is generational, I think, and I think it will continue to be that exponentially. It's continuously growing as robots and as AI come on board, even more so the necessity to be able to connect and engaging others, their hearts, as opposed to them being compliant and carrying out what you think needs to be done.
Yeah, I can see that correlation. It makes sense that um, the parts that technology can't replace, which is really being human and being connected, are
Hmm.
going to become much more of a valuable commodity in
Yes.
all spheres of life,
Yes.
particularly professional capacity and particularly across industrial companies, I think, because connection really matters, especially in an
Yes.
area like safety too. It's really interesting. I really liked what you said earlier. I mean, actually, I'm going to rephrase it. I loved this expression of seek to understand before being understood. I think that's
Yes.
a graceful way to put it. But it's a powerful framework that I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to take that one if you don't mind.
Stephen Covey is the one that started. I just
Yeah.
continue to use it. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. It's really, really, really good. Okay. I mean, this has been awesome. I'm going to move on to my final question, actually, which is
Sure.
if you think back across both the professional and the personal mistake, but also I know that, you've got many experiences throughout your career and personally as well. And if you were to meet someone, I don't know, 20, 30 years, your junior, or maybe your 25-year-old self, is there sort of one sentence that you might share with them to help them avoid either of those mistakes or both those mistakes, just to either help them avoid it or help them handle that mistake? How might you advise or advise them with that situation?
Wow. I would say be authentic and true to yourself and be okay not being okay. And that becomes a cornerstone around what really I think drives us into trying to beat other people is because we feel like we have to measure up to other people's expectations.
Hmm.
In short, I guess I would say make a point to make sure that the ladder that you are climbing is against the wall that you showed up on the planet to be climbing against. A lot of people spend their lives, careers climbing a ladder that's leaning against someone else's wall. And they wonder when they get up to the top, why is it that they're not being fulfilled? I would ask them, let me ask you, where you are right now, the ladder that you're climbing, are you authentically climbing that ladder? And is it leaning against the wall that it needs to be for you to be who you already are? Because really walking out life is around really revealing who's already there. It's not like we need to go and get anything.
Mm,
In the book, I really emphasize the importance is around subtraction and not addition. What labels have I taken on? What mindsets have I taken on? What beliefs have I taken on? What package and programming have I brought forward from my parents and from their parents that I'm taking on that's really covering up more and more my authentic self? And so, therefore, I cannot live authentically. So, therefore, I exist in a way to please others, only to realize I blew my life.
mm,
And
right.
that's what I really drive home in the book is that make sure that the leader within has an opportunity to come forth and be authentic about it and realize you can't lead people where you're not willing to go. And so therefore we're trying to lead people in directions that we authentically are not led to do. And therefore we wonder why we are really not at peace. Disease is diseasement. I'm not at ease. And so let's make sure we don't bring forth a disease of not being authentic.
Interesting. I love
Mm.
that. That's a great note to end on. Um, yeah, super, super powerful. So much to take from that. Well, I hope you've had fun. I definitely
That
have.
was fun. I thank you so much for the opportunity. This has just been outstanding. I hope if anyone is able to benefit from this, it really blesses me. And that has made all of this work well.
Today, we talked about mistakes, what they reveal, and how they stay with us. If you want to go deeper, join the Misconstrued community for members-only access to our guests and extended insight. Until next time.